They say you can hear a whisper travel across the fog-drenched streets of London late on a Sunday morning, a breath of curiosity that finds its way to 221B Baker Street. Imagine the moment you arrive, your footsteps softened by a slick of rain-soaked cobblestones, the distant toll of St. Marylebone's bell adding cadence to each measured step. The hallway door, painted a weary shade of ebony, stands half-lit by the gray dawn. You're not sure if it's the light within or the mist outside that makes the air feel suspended, as though every second might stretch into an eternity. A brass knocker gleams dully at its center, its metal cool against your palm. You raise it and let it fall. 3 deliberate taps that echo back to you, carrying a promise of quiet discovery. Inside, the fire in the hearth crackles without urgency, its amber glow flickering across walls lined with tomes and curiosities. Rich mahogany shelves sag under the weight of leather-bound volumes, their spines etched in gold. Papers and folders lie stacked on tables, as though awaiting the touch of an unseen hand. A worn rug cushions your steps, muffling any sound you make, granting you passage into Holmes' realm of contemplation. Doctor. John Watson is seated by the window, his gaze trained on the gray expanse beyond. His shoulders are relaxed, a rare sight, and the soft click of his boots against wood marks the precision of his posture even in stillness. In one hand, he clasps a teacup, its porcelain warmed by the steam that rises in delicate curls. A newspaper lies unfolded on his knee, its headlines muted beneath his attention to the world outside. He notices you last after you've allowed yourself a moment to acquaint with the room. His lips curve into a gentle greeting, with a lilting warmth that makes you feel immediately welcome. The thick wool of his coat traps the residual chill of the street, and when he sets the cup aside with soft porcelain-on-wood contact, you hear the subtle promise of comfort he extends. Sherlock Holmes' domain, by contrast, exudes restless energy. He stands at his work table, backlit by the muted light of early Sunday, bent over a small glass vessel. Smoky plumes rise from its neck, drifting into the air like slow-moving ghosts. The corked bottle is half empty, and Holmes's long fingers, stained faintly with chemical traces, hover over it as if in silent conversation. His silk dressing gown, a deep shade of burgundy, falls loosely around his frame. Under its folds, a crisp linen shirt and tailored trousers hint at his sharp elegance. Yet even in this state of casual repose, Holmes remains an instrument of scrutiny. Eyes narrowed, nostrils flaring slightly at the faintest hint of scent in the room. He turns, catching your glance with a flicker of interest, as though he welcomes you as a puzzle newly posed. Watson rises, moving to the hearth, and offers you a seat in the high-backed armchair facing Holmes's own. You take it, noting how the cushion shapes itself to your form, a testament to years of loyal company. The warmth seeps into your bones, coaxing the chill from your limbs, and you realize the subtle design of Baker Street mornings. They invite contemplation and calm before the inevitable stirrings of mystery. Holmes' eyes glimmer as he steps forward, voice carrying the soft timbre of a man who speaks more to his own thoughts than to an audience. A perfect morning for a case, wouldn't you say, Watson? His eyebrows arch, forming questions in the air. The fog holds secrets, and the damp cobbles whisper of untold stories. Watson chuckles, smoothing the lapel of his coat. Our visitor may find these charms less comforting than we do, Sherlock. But there is a rhythm, a certain music to it all. Even the rain has its own cadence when you pause to listen. Holmes nods, and you watch the interplay of their camaraderie, a dance between logic and empathy, between the chill thrill of deduction and the gentle tether of human warmth. Their bond transforms 221B Baker Street into more than a flat. It is a sanctuary where the intellect coexists with the heart, even as it braces for the unknown. A knock interrupts the moment, one gentle rap that carries an urgency at odds with the room's calm. It is neither timid nor brash. It is measured, precise, demanding entry, yet mindful of propriety. Watson moves to the door, boots creaking against the floor, and returns with a newcomer under his arm's subtle encouragement. The man stands in the entryway, framed by the soft glow behind him. His coat is damp, shoulders stiff, hat in hand. He seems as though he has emerged from the mist itself, an apparition drawn by fate's quiet insistence. In his gloved hand, he he carries what can only be described as an artifact of significance. A journal bound in dark leather, its cover unadorned save for the faint impression of initials. He steps forward, and the room's warmth brushes against his collar. The scent of his coat, wet wool and distant smoke, mingles with the laboratory's sharper odors, creating a tableau of worlds colliding. The street's damp reality meeting the hearth's domestic comfort, all under Holmes' investigative gaze. Holmes inclines his head, eyes never leaving the parcel. "A curious choice," he murmurs, "and a burden, I suspect." The visitor's voice is low, layered with restraint and desperation. "I did not come to burden your Sunday, Mr. Holmes, but within this journal is the only clue to my brother's fate. He vanished 2 evenings past, leaving nothing but questions and an empty train berth. I have followed every lead, all roads end here." Watson steps nearer, offering the journal a place by the firelight. "Allow me," he says. The visitor hesitates, then relinquishes his hold. The journal's leather is cool, smooth, and its pages emit a faint musk of age and secrecy. Watson flicks it open with careful fingers, revealing handwriting neat and precise, the ink barely faded. Holmes moves to stand beside him, gaze scanning the script. Each letter, each margin note, he absorbs as though they were puzzle pieces waiting to interlock. "Notice," he says softly, "the margin here at the third entry, a slight indentation, as though pressed with a fingernail. A signal, or an involuntary gesture of anxiety?" The visitor nods, lips pressed tight. He wrote of dreams, disturbing dreams of corridors that shift and lock behind him. He claimed his pursuer walked in silence. He feared the city itself. Holmes's eyes gleam. Dreams can reveal deeper truths, and if the city is his adversary, then we must look to its hidden arteries, the alleys and subways that thrum beneath the surface. London is more than streets and buildings. It is a living labyrinth. Outside, the rain softens, as though tamed by the quiet intensity inside 221B. You lean forward, drawn into the gravity of Holmes' contemplation and the visitor's palpable fear. The hearth's glow becomes a beacon, guiding you deeper into the unfolding drama. Watson closes the journal and looks to Holmes. "Shall we begin?" Holmes smiles, a thin curve that speaks of impatience and delight. "Indeed, let the first step be taken." The room breathes around you, alive with the crackle of fire and the shiver of anticipation. Outside, London waits, its veins pulsing with mystery and potential. Here, in this sanctuary of thought and reason, the ordinary Sunday has blossomed into the threshold of adventure. Listen to the hush between raindrops. Let the warmth of the fire settle across your shoulders, and rest in the knowledge that the journey has begun. Part the curtain of mist, feel the weight of the journal in your hands, and step across the line where a question becomes a quest. The story continues. The crackle of the hearth behind you fades into a soft backdrop as Holmes settles himself in his chair, journal in hand. Outside, the Sunday mist deepens, drawing London's lacework of lanes and courtyards into gray obscurity. Inside a 221B, however, the warmth and the urgency grows. The visitor's tale has opened a window into a hidden London, one that shifts in shadow and secret. Watson leans forward, his voice calm as he asks, "Tell us everything you know of your brother's last hours." The man clears his throat, placing a tentative hand upon his knee before glancing at Holmes's intent gaze. He left home Tuesday evening, carrying only this journal and a letter addressed to a contact he would never name. He says, voice quivering. "He briefed me on a job, an exchange. He was convinced it would bring him a respite from debts that had shadowed him for months." Holmes taps his fingertips together, eyes narrowing. Debt can be a powerful motivator, but rarely the only one. "Did he mention the nature of this exchange?" The visitor shakes his head, only that the location would be provided in the letter's postscript. Watson unfolds a crisp sheet of stationery, retrieved from the visitor's coat pocket. Holmes accepts it, tilting his head to absorb both script and spacing. Slanted lines, the swell of letters, the trailing dots of I's, each a small footprint of the writer's character. "An appointment at Aldgate Station at 9:30, Holmes murmurs, voice low, and a single phrase, "Trust the eye that cannot close." Odd. Watson raises an eyebrow. An enigma wrapped in an idiom. Holmes smiles. Precisely. Now, Watson, the time is after breakfast, daylight waning. To reach Aldgate undetected, we must move quickly. The hearth's glow flickers as Holmes rises, cloak clasped at the collar. Watson hands the journal to the visitor. Keep that safe. We may need to reference it again. You follow as they prepare to leave, stepping through the front door into the muted world of Baker Street. The hallway's thin carpet keeps your footsteps secret, but the door's weight gives a final rumble as it closes behind you, sealing the haven you've known. London greets you with damp stones and the ceaseless drip of rain from gutter spouts. Gas lamps glow stubbornly against the pall, their yellow halos warring with the gray. The trio moves at a purposeful pace toward the Strand, where omnibus and hansom cabs rattle by, each driver calling his destination as though it were a prayer. Holmes pauses beneath an archway, examining the cobbles. He kneels and brushes at a smear of oil, dark, viscous, tucked in the cracks. Fresh, he declares. A carriage passed this way within the last hour. Note the lateral drag. It turned right onto Fleet Street. Watson glances at you. Footnotes to a mystery, quietly left beneath our boots. You gingerly touch the smear, sensing the weight of unnoticed signs around you. Holmes stands and leads the way, alley by alley, where the roar of the main thoroughfares fades into a hush. Here, shutters droop, windows stare blankly. Laundry hangs above, drying in the drizzle, the fabric's edges frayed by urban wind. The walls bear the dampness of years, brick seams mottled with moss and soot. At a narrow passage marked only by a carved stone dragon, Holmes stops. He holds up a hand. We're off the beaten path, Watson. Few would choose this route, fewer still at this hour. A sudden echo, a slow footstep rises behind you. Holmes turns. A figure stands in the gloom, indistinct beneath a tattered cloak. Holmes inclines his head. Evening, sir. Unlikely to find your way in these back streets. The stranger's voice is half-whisper. I seek passage to Aldgate. Holmes's lips curl. Sojourners bound for the East End, seldom seen out so early, and yet the fog might offer cover. He glances at you and Watson. Shall we? The man falls in step, voice edge with caution. I saw your carriage oil on the ground. Holmes's eyebrows rise. Observant, you too are a traveler of odd routes. Tell me, what brings you here? A pause. The stranger exhales. I know your quarry. Your brother is in danger, not from debts, but from something darker, something that walks beneath London's feet. Watson tenses. You feel the shift. An unseen current courses among you. Beneath London, Holmes says thoughtfully. The underground. The stranger inclines his head. The circle line between Aldgate and Tower Hill. It's not the train itself. It's the tunnels. No light reaches there, and something watches. Holmes draws nearer, voice barely above breath. You speak of a watcher in the dark? A person or legend? Neither, the man replies. Something else. Holmes nods. Then lead us. The sun, hidden behind swollen clouds, offers no warmth. They descend into the vaulted entrance of Aldgate Station. The lanterns flicker at the platform's edge, where the polished rails gleam like the polished steel of a stiletto blade. The stranger purchases tickets with slender fingers and steps aside to let you and the detectives pass. The carriage arrives with a groan of metal wheels on iron. Shadows pool in the corners, and the benches are empty save for a solitary lantern flickering at the end. Holmes, Watson, you, and the stranger board. The door clicks shut, sealing the damp air inside. Holmes stands by the window, steaming with breath. The watchman said his brother vanished between this stop and the one before. The stranger nods. Between Aldgate and Tower Hill. He never disembarked. Watson grips the journal closer. Has anyone heard from him since? No, the stranger replies. No letters, no sightings, just the empty berth. And those dreams he wrote of, dreams of footsteps and barred gates. The train lurches forward, lanterns flaring against the tunnel's black walls. Every jolt sends reverberations through the carriage, and you sense something concealed in the gloom beyond the windows. A shifting, patient presence. Holmes steps toward the door. He opens it and leans out, lantern held high. The tunnel yawns, iron rails curving into nothing. No station lights, no human shape, just a press of bricks, arched like a rib cage. He listens, silent, and then steps back in, face pale beneath the lamp's glow. "What did you hear?" Watson asks. Holmes's voice is low. "Nothing and everything." The tunnel breathes. It contracts and expands around you. If one listens too closely, they hear something else. A distant hiss, the train entering a wider expanse. The carriage rattles as it slows. Lanterns reveal the platform. Empty, silent, Tower Hill. The stranger is tense. This is where he boarded his nightmares. They disembark. The platform's lanterns cast long shadows. The visitor steps forward, and you follow, the journal burning in your coat pocket. Watson taps his cane. "Any signs?" Holmes kneels, examining a smear of damp clay beside a drain. "Not London's mud. This is river silt." He was where he shouldn't have been, downstream, near the wall that faces the Thames. They thread through the abandoned arcs of the station, where the hollow of disuse echoes with every footstep. You brush against the cold iron pillar, imagining the brothers' final moments. Holmes's lantern swings across the wall, etched names, dates of construction. Then, near the corner, a wooden hatch, boards swollen with moisture. A freight tunnel. Holmes breathes. He kneels, pressing fingertips to the wood. If he went this way, it was not to share its path. Watson draws his revolver. "Shall we?" Holmes nods. He wrests the hatch free, the timber groaning. A rancid draft escapes, must and mildew. He peers in. Your lantern follows his gaze, revealing a steep iron ladder plunging into darkness. The stranger hesitates. Holmes's gaze meets his. "Your brother descended here?" He nods, voice stiff. He wrote of that descent. He thought a meeting place awaited. Holmes stands. "Then we follow." You pause at the ladder's brink, heart pulsing in time with the muffled drip of water. The tunnel awaits, silent and expectant. You step forward, candle held high. Watson follows, his steps steady but slow. The stranger lingers before descending. Holmes turns. No time to hesitate. Lead on. He glances at you as you perch on the ladder's first rung. Stay close and light all the way. You climb down into the belly of London, the lantern flame trembling as it finds the walls slick with condensation. The ladder's rungs creak underfoot, and the tunnel's mouth closes above you like a lid. For the first time, the air is stifling, thick with years of forgotten passage. Each breath tastes of iron and rot. The descent seems endless until at last you step onto uneven ground, littered with debris, wooden beams, rusted tools, fragments of brick. Holmes moves forward, eyes alight in the darkness. "Remarkable," he murmurs. "This corridor was used for clandestine shipments, diamonds perhaps, or political pamphlets, little traced in official records." Watson shines his light on tracks worn into the stone floor. "And your brother walked this path?" The stranger's voice wavers. According to him, he met someone at the end. He said the walls themselves spoke. A soft noise, a breath or the shiver of wind, drifts through the tunnel. You freeze. Holmes holds up a gloved hand. "Shh." Silence. Your lantern beam sweeps ahead, alighting on a collared sleeve, a fragment of fabric caught on a splintered beam. The stranger steps forward and kneels, brushing his fingers across the cloth. His face pales. "My coat." Watson moves closer. Holmes's jaw tightens. "He came this way." A sudden echo, high, keening. A voice? A shriek carried across distance? The lantern flame flickers wildly. You grip the beam. The walls seem to breathe closer. Holmes's voice cuts the tension. "Steady." It's only sound, until proven otherwise. The visitor stands, coat fragment in hand. His eyes glimmer with resolve and fear. "I want to find him, Mr. Holmes, no matter what lingers in these shadows." Holmes inclines his head, then onward. Deeper you venture, toward an uncertain light, if light awaits at the end. Each step echoes with the weight of hope and dread, and the knowledge that in these subterranean halls, time itself seems to warp. Above, the city continues its Sunday hush, but here, in London's hidden arteries, a mystery pulses with its own life, and the journey has only just begun. The dawn on Baker Street remains a distant memory as the door to 221B closes behind you, each footstep muffled by that familiar rug. Holmes, Watson, Clara Montrose, and the visitors stand in the soft glow of the hearth, breath visible in the cool air. Clara's face is drawn, eyes heavy with remorse. Watson pours hot tea into delicate porcelain cups, offering Clara one as he speaks gently. You have confessed, and the truth will guide what comes next. Holmes removes his gloves, placing them on the mantel. He studies Clara and the visitor in turn, gauging their resolve. The journal, he says, holds the key to deeper understanding. We must review every line, every margin note in the clarity of daylight. The visitor retrieves his brother's journal from inside his coat. He opens it to the first entry of the night his brother disappeared, reading aloud in a voice that trembles between hope and despair. I fear London's shadows grow too thick for my weary mind. The air hums with voices I cannot name. I have arranged a final exchange on Baker Street, yet my instincts warn me this path may lead to more than debt settled. Holmes listens, steepling his fingers. He speaks of instinct, an alertness to threat. The reference to Baker Street, why here? Watson nods. He wrote of meeting someone under our very windows, but did not specify who. Clara's brow furrows. I believed it was me, someone I trusted. Holmes raises a single finger. Trust can be a double-edged blade. Your intentions, Miss Montrose, were protective, yet the tunnel below suggests a plan that transcended simple debt relief. We must examine the ledger entries he kept in the hidden back pages. He flips to a section of blank pages at the journal's end, revealing faint pencil impressions, notes erased with inconsiderate haste. Under magnification, Holmes illuminates a string of numbers and names. Dockyard Vault, 11:45 p.m. Whitechapel Alley, Midnight Tower Bridge East. Holmes traces the list, tapping each with deliberate precision. Multiple rendezvous. He sought something or someone in each location. The final notes mention the watcher in the Thames. Watson exhales. Could he have mistaken a person for rumor? Holmes smiles thinly. Rumors can manifest as flesh and bone. We must return to the docks, where water and shadow meet. You wrap your shawl tighter and stand. Clara grips her teacup, resolve hardened by guilt and an urgent need for redemption. The visitor steadies himself. Moments later, you step into the gray morning, the mist heavier than before. Baker Street's familiar facades recede as you hurry eastward, Holmes leading the way with unerring direction. The group threads through streets, Fleet, Whitehall, emerging at the Thames's embankment where the river's breath carries salt and secrets. Dockyard vaults rise like silent monoliths along the water's edge, their iron doors padlocked against intruders. Holmes examines the lock mechanism with keen interest, tapping the metal. Not forced, unlocked from within. Clara steps forward. He entered here? Holmes nods. See the scratch marks above the lock. Height indicates his frame, yet deeper gouges betray another's strength. Watson adjusts his coat. No time for subterfuge, shall we? Holmes pries the padlock open with a small tool. The door swings inward on rusted hinges, revealing a steep ramp descending into utter darkness. A single lantern glows at the base. Inside, broken crates and coils of rope litter the floor. The air is dank and thick. You notice footprints, booted and bare, leading to a small boat tied to a cleat. Holmes kneels. Marks indicate seating for two. The patterns differ, one heavy, one light. Clara's voice shakes. He thought to escape by water, to reach safety. Holmes stands, lantern raised, or to follow someone into oblivion. They board the boat, Holmes at the bow, lantern suspended from the mast. Watson rows with steady strokes. The river carries you southeast, its current swift beneath the arches of Tower Bridge. Watson speaks quietly to Clara. Hold fast. We know his motive now, flight, but from what? Clara's tears fall silently. From guilt, he helped those men who twisted his debts. He believed he could redeem himself by a single transaction. A sudden splash, a hand pale and desperate reaches from the water. You lean over the edge, heart pounding, but the hand recedes into the black tunnel at the riverbank. Holmes peers ahead. "Mr. Watson, steer toward those arches. I have a notion." The boat glides toward an arch on the upstream side. Holmes slips overboard, boots splashing, lantern held high. You witness him pause at a low doorway carved into the stone pier. The threshold is scuffed, familiar mud staining the sill. He calls back, voice echoing, "Safe passage here, but tread lightly." Watson guides the boat to the wall. You climb out, boots sinking in mud. The group follows, entering a low-ceilinged chamber where water drips incessantly. Phosphorescent algae create a faint glow on the walls, as though marking a secret path. Holmes illuminates claw marks, long, uneven gouges that no worker's tool could make. "Here is your watcher, London's hidden guardian." There's a rustle behind you. Clara gasps. A figure emerges from the shadows, a tall man in tattered coat, eyes reflecting lantern light with feral intensity. His limbs contort unnaturally as he strides forward. Watson raises his revolver. Holmes steps between Clara and the watcher, voice calm but firm. "Back away. We mean no harm unless provoked." The man's voice is a gurgle as though words struggle for form. Yet you discern a plea. "Find him. Save me." Clara moves to the watcher, recognizing a familiar gait. Her brother's. His face is gaunt, skin clinging to bone. He raises a trembling hand, tracing the air between you. Watson's eyes soften. "Henry?" The watcher's eyes focus briefly, floods of recognition sweeping across his features. He collapses onto his knees. Lantern splashes across his face, revealing fear and relief. Holmes examines the clawed walls. Exposure to these fumes, this darkness, it transforms the mind and body. He was drugged, led to believe the tunnel's legends, to believe he became its sentinel. Clara sobs, dropping to her knees beside her brother. Watson kneels too, checking breaths. He exhales with relief as she groans, eyes fluttering open. Holmes approaches, lantern in hand. He studies the watcher's vacant stare. He needs air, light, and time. You help Clara lift her brother. Together, you carry him back along the tunnel shaft, through the freight cavity, and up the ladder toward the daylight cradle of Aldgate Station. Watson presses a flask of brandy to Henry's lips. He sips, color returning to cheeks. Clara weeps softly, hands clasped. Holmes stands at the station's edge, surveying the tracks, as if pondering the riddles he has solved, and those yet to surface. He turns to you, voice gentle, compassion and deduction, twin lights guiding through darkness. Clara embraces her brother. Watson offers him support. You stand back, chest warm with relief. On Baker Street, the hearth crackles once more. Henry rests in a chair, speaking incoherently of whispers and shadows. Clara holds his hand, tears and hope mingling. Holmes examines the journal's final notation. "Trust the eye that cannot close." He smiles faintly. The lantern's beam, our unwavering eye. Watson laughs softly. "Brilliant as ever, Holmes." Holmes's gaze drifts to the fire. Even the darkest mysteries bend before light and loyalty. Above, London breathes, its Sunday hush restored. But in hearts and minds, a story endures, a testament to those who walk the line between shadow and flame. Rest now, dear listener. Let the journey's close lull you into gentle slumber. The night holds its own whispers, but here, in warmth and safety, dreams need only your quiet breath to flourish. Morning light filters through the tall windows of 221B Baker Street, painting the cluttered sitting room in shades of gold and amber. The embers in the hearth glow softly, a quiet testament to the night's trials. Holmes stands by the mantel, arms crossed, surveying the scene. Watson tending to Henry's recuperation with gentle care, Clara kneeling beside her brother, and you settling into the armchair by the fire, shawl drawn about your shoulders. Holmes turns to you, eyes alight with satisfaction, tempered by reflection. The final enigma remains. What drove Mr. Montrose to dream the shadows into reality? You leaned forward, stirred by his question. The drugs, the isolation, the mold? Holmes nods. A trifecta of influences. Fear nourishes itself in darkness, and here, London's hidden arteries became both setting and catalyst. He gestures toward the journal resting on the mantel. Let us close this chapter with clarity. Dr. Watson, wiping Henry's brow with a damp cloth, glances up. His brother's notes end abruptly after that final meeting at Whitechapel Alley. The rest is blank. Clara's voice is soft. He stopped writing when the visions consumed him. Holmes steps forward, fingertips brushing the journal's spine. Then we fill the silence with understanding. Mr. Montrose, how do you feel? Henry's voice emerges, raspy but firm. Lost, afraid, then glad. Watson assists him to sit upright, offering the brandy flask. Henry sips, eyes growing clearer. I saw shapes in the walls, heard words in the drip of water. I believed I was becoming part of the tunnel. Holmes's gaze sharpens. You believed yourself dissolved into the darkness, as if the tunnel demanded a guardian. Henry nods. I thought if I faded completely I would be safe. Holmes's expression softens. You sought safety in oblivion, and nearly found oblivion itself. Yet your story guides us to truth. No place is more binding than the mind's own prisons. Clara reaches for Henry's hand. I should have protected you, rather than lead you here. Holmes inclines his head. Love, when untempered by reason, can become its own peril. But confession and care can mend what fear fractured. You rise, crossing to the mantel. And what of Baker Street? Will its own shadows whisper secrets tonight? Holmes allows a near smile. Every hearth harbors stories, but here, the fire burns against the dark, and reason holds the line. He turns to Watson. Your medical attention nursed him through more than fever. Watson waves a hand. We all did our part. The morning hush envelops the room once more. Street sounds drift through the single-pane window. Distant carriage wheels. A church bell tolling its first chime of noon. Beyond these walls, London carries on, each life a mystery of its own. Holmes moves to the window, pressing a palm against the cool glass. A satisfactory conclusion, but also a new beginning. Fear has been replaced by understanding, guilt by forgiveness. Clara stands, gathering her coat. She looks to Holmes. Am I to face justice for what I did? Holmes considers. You will speak truthfully to the authorities, and also to those you love. The law has its course, but conscience must run its own. Watson assists Henry to his feet. Come, Miss Montrose. We will accompany you. You step to the doorway, lantern in hand. Shall I bid you farewell, or begin another chapter? Holmes tilts his head, eyes gleaming. Both. The story ends here tonight, but life's tapestry weaves onward. Clara pauses, tears in her eyes, and then smiles wanly. Thank you. Together they depart to 21B into the brightening morning. Holmes and Watson exchange a nod before the door closes. You return to the armchair, settling in as the hearth's warmth envelops you. The room's details, books, instruments, the curl of smoke above Holmes's pipe resting nearby, coalesce into a tableau of calm. Holmes's voice, soft and distant, emerges from memory. In the end, it is friendship and intellect that dispel the deepest shadows, even when fear tempts us to believe otherwise. Watson's laughter lingers in your mind, a sound like reassuring footsteps. And so, dear listener, the whisper of Baker Street fades, replaced by the rhythmic hum of your own breath. Let the embers spark visions of warm hearths and steadfast minds. Trust that curiosity will guide you, but that compassion grounds you. Rest now, content in the knowledge that mysteries unfold within and without, and that light, however small, prevails. Good night, dear traveler, until our whispers meet again. The wind drifts in from the pale Atlantic, carrying the faint salt of sea air and the distant murmur of waves against the rocky shore. The Devon hills around Greenway House are steeped in summer dusk, the fading light painting the valleys in lavender and rose. Imagine yourself there, walking along a narrow path of worn flagstones, each stone warmed by the day's sun. Above you, oak and chestnut trees form a lacy canopy that filters the last golden rays, casting moving patterns of light and shadow on the path. The air feels soft, scented with the subtle sweetness of wild honeysuckle and fresh-cut grass. In the distance, the great house sits perched above a secluded cove, its veranda lights twinkling like quiet sentinels welcoming you home. You approach the wrought iron gate at the end of the path. Its hinges whisper a gentle protest as it swings open, and you step into a world both familiar and enchanted. The broad terrace stretches before you, laid in smooth flagstone and lined with pots of lavender and rosemary, whose fragrance swirls around your ankles. A small table with two high-backed wicker chairs sits near the balustrade, draped in a linen cloth embroidered with delicate floral motifs. On the table rests a porcelain teapot, its surface painted with tiny blossoms, and two cups that steam gently in the cooling air. Beyond, the cove's waters shimmer with the last light, turning from silver to deep indigo as dusk deepens. From within the house, the soft glow of lamplight spills through tall, mullioned windows. The scent of old books mingles with candles burning low, their flames revealing shelves lined with leather-bound volumes. You cross the terrace and push open the door, greeted by a faint warmth as the interior enfolds you. The hall's polished oak floorboards creak softly underfoot. A tapestry of muted reds and golds hangs on the wall. An earl's hunting scene, its hunters and hounds paused in mid-chase, evoking a sense of timeless stories waiting to unfold. A low window seat, piled with cushions and faded chintz, invites you to rest a moment and watch the horizon beyond the glass. From the drawing room ahead, a crackle of firewood suggests comfort. You enter to find a wide fireplace carved from Devon granite, its hearth ablaze with dancing flames. The glow illuminates a pair of high-backed armchairs draped in knitted throws, their cushions plumped just so. Between them, a small table holds an array of treats, crisp shortbread, slices of fruitcake studded with raisins and almonds, and a silver dish of freshly picked Devonshire strawberries. A silver tea tray bears a pot of Earl Grey, 2 cups, a small bowl of clotted cream, and a dish of strawberry jam. The china bears the crest of Agatha Christie's family, a subtle reminder that this house has belonged to its mistress for years. This very heart of the world she called home. In one armchair sits Agatha Christie herself, tall, elegant, with silver-streaked hair pinned back, wearing a simple tweed skirt and a soft wool cardigan. Her fingers tap a gentle rhythm on the armrest as she looks up, a welcoming smile lighting her features. Her eyes hold the quiet spark of curiosity, the same spark that drives her to weave intricate puzzles of human nature in her novels. She gestures to the chair opposite. "Do sit," she says, voice warm and unhurried, like a gentle brook winding through still woods. "I've just finished an outline I've been pondering all afternoon." You settle into the chair, its seat giving just enough to cradle you without denying support. The firelight warms your back, and the soft ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner marks each passing moment with genteel precision. Outside, a lone owl hoots, a sound both plaintive and reassuring in the gathering twilight. On the mantel rests a carved oak box inscribed with her initials. She opens it, revealing an array of fountain pens, each with a different nib, and a leather-bound notebook filled with margin notes in her neat cursive. A half-finished manuscript lies open on the side table, the page edged with annotations. Consider motive here. Could this be too obvious? Perhaps a missing letter instead of a body? She pours tea for both of you, the aromatic steam curling heavenward. The first sip is rich, a harmony of bergamot and black tea that settles warmly in your chest. She offers you a slice of fruitcake, its crumb tender and sweet, studded with citrus peel that sparks each bite. You taste the layers of flavor, the brandy-glazed cherries, the subtle hint of nutmeg, the underlying tang of currants. As you savor it, she watches you with genuine interest, as though each expression you make reveals a clue to your own story. Then she leans forward, steepling her fingers. "Shall we talk of mysteries?" Her question drifts into the room like a silken thread, inviting you to follow wherever it might lead. Outside, lanterns strung along the terrace begin to glow, their light twinkling through the dusk as fireflies emerge in the garden. The hush is complete, no distant engines, no hurried footfalls, only the sound of soft wind in the leaves and the lapping of water against the cove's pebbled shore. She begins to describe her latest inspiration, an isolated cottage on Dartmoor, where the heather blooms in summer purple, concealing secrets in its tangled recesses. You close your eyes and see the lonely horizon, feel the chill of the moorland air, and hear the distant bleat of a sheep in the night. She speaks of an eccentric collector of antiquities who disappears during a midsummer storm, leaving only an overturned armchair and a single clay pipe on the windowsill. You lean forward, drawn in by the rhythm of her words and the precise unfolding of the puzzle. A sudden gust rattles the window panes, and she pauses, eyes twinkling. Ah, but every storm reveals something new. A missing clasp, a footprint in the soil, a coded message in the embroidery. She reaches for a small velvet box on the side table and opens it to reveal a silver locket, intricately engraved. This once belonged to a lady who vanished from her drawing room. No note, no farewell, just emptiness. She holds it up to the lamp's glow, the metal catching the light like a secret reflected. You feel the anticipation build, the familiar thrill of an unraveling enigma stirring in your veins. But there is no urgency here, only a measured pace, each detail murmured as though sharing a beloved confidant's whisper. She offers you the locket to hold, its weight cooling your palm, its surface etched with a rosé motif that seems to shift under your gaze. "What do you make of this?" she asks. Before you can answer, a distant bell tolls the hour, its sonorous notes drifting in through the open window. Outside, the cove's waters glow like melted glass in the lamplight. Fireflies swirl above the lavender bushes. The world feels paused, poised between story and dream. You open your eyes, returning to the drawing room, where Agatha Christie watches you with a pleased smile. She settles back in her chair. "Rest for a moment," she suggests. "Let the mystery breathe." You sip your tea and feel the warmth spread through you, drawing you deeper into comfort. The candles on the mantel flicker as if in time with your slowing heartbeat. The owl outside calls again, reminding you that even in solitude, you are never truly alone. As you sit in that golden circle of lamp and firelight, the house itself seems to lean in, as though eager to share its own tales. The books on the shelves rustle faintly, the tapestry on the wall seems to shift ever so subtly, and the carved oak floorboards retain the echo of every step ever taken there. In this moment, you are both guest and co-conspirator in a world where every glance, every turn of phrase, is laden with potential. She stands, crossing to a globe near the window. Her slender fingers spin it slowly, pausing on distant lands. Egypt, where she once solved a crime beneath a setting sun, and the blue train, whose polished carriages conceal secrets in the compartments. Yet here, in Devon, the mystery is personal, intimate, woven from the soft textures of home and hearth. She returns to you, placing a hand on your arm. "Tomorrow, we venture to the garden maze," she whispers. There, the clues await in stone statues and hidden alcoves. The promise of tomorrow's intrigue warms you like the hearth's glow. You rise and step to the window, looking out over the cove. The tide is drawn back, revealing wet sands dotted with seaweed and shells. Lantern light shimmers on the water's edge. A path of stepping stones leads from the boathouse to the cliffs above, a silent invitation to discovery. You close the window and turn to her, heart light with expectation. She pours one last cup of tea for tomorrow's journey and hands you the silver locket. "Keep this safe," she says, "for the maze demands tokens of trust." You slip it into your pocket and settle back, the chairs cushion embracing you. In the hush of Agatha Christie's Devon evening, the world has narrowed to this: firelight, tea, the murmur of waves, and the promise of a puzzle yet unsolved. Rest in that circle of calm, dear listener, and let curiosity carry you toward sleep. For soon, in tomorrow's dawn, the maze will beckon, and the story will continue to unfold, one gentle, thrilling clue at a time. The lanterns along the terrace cast soft puddles of light across the flagstones as you step outside once more, the silver locket resting warm against your palm. A gentle breeze drifts off the cove, cool against your cheeks, carrying with it the tang of salt and the distant call of a nightingale. Mrs. Christie stands at the entrance to the garden maze, her silhouette framed by the soft glow of lantern-lit hedges. She lifts a hand in invitation. "This way," she murmurs, her voice drifting like a promise. You follow her down a narrow path lined with lavender bushes, their flowers nodding sleepily beneath the moonlight. Each inhalation brings the subtle sweetness of their bloom, and you feel the day's tension melting into the hush of night. The stone wall of the maze rises before you, ivy-clad and ancient, its entrance marked by two weathered stone pillars carved with cherubs whose faces have been smoothed by time. On one pillar, you notice a tiny keyhole discreetly hidden beneath a curling tendril of ivy. Agatha retrieves a slender bronze key from the pocket of her cardigan and fits it into the lock. With a soft click, the gate swings inward, revealing a labyrinth of pathways that twist away into darkness. She lights a handheld lantern, its flame dancing across the hedge leaves as she steps forward. Legends say this maze was planted to test the mettle of Greenway's guests, she explains, lantern held aloft. Each turn offers a clue, some obvious, some concealed, to guide or mislead. You step into the maze, the lantern's glow revealing a gravel path that forks almost immediately. To the left, the path curves beneath a trellis draped with jasmine. To the right, a low arch of yew branches looms. The air here is thick with the heady scent of night-blooming flowers. Christie pauses, studying you with keen, amused eyes. Your first choice, scent or shadow? Trusting your instincts, you turn toward the jasmine-scented trellis. As you pass beneath, the blossoms brush your shoulders, scattering petals onto the gravel. Ahead, a stone bench appears, tucked into a slight alcove, where moonlight filters through an opening in the hedge. On the bench lies a folded slip of parchment, sealed with deep red wax bearing Christie's family crest. She nods to it, encouraging you to take it. You break the seal and unfold the note. In elegant handwriting you read, "Where echoes fade, seek the heart. Where silence speaks, dwell the start." Christie's lips curve. A riddle, of course. We must find where echoes fade, perhaps an open clearing or a sunken garden. She gestures onward. Lead the way. You turn down the path lined with yew, the branches arching overhead so close that the lantern light dances along their twisted shapes. The gravel crunches underfoot, and you pause as the hush deepens. Here, every footstep seems amplified, every rustle magnified, but after a few paces, the hedges open onto a circular clearing paved in moss-grown cobbles. In the center, a small stone plinth stands, topped with an empty birdcage fashioned of wrought iron. The only sound is the faint drip of dew from the surrounding foliage. Christie steps forward and examines the cage. "No echo here," she murmurs. "The bars hold no bird, the silence is complete." You lean in and see carved into the plinth's base a single word, heart. Beneath it, an arrow pointing toward a narrow passage shrouded in darkness. She hands you the lantern. Your turn. You hold the flame steady and walk toward the passage, the walls narrowing until the lantern beam barely reaches the next bend. At the turn, you find a low stone seat carved into the hedge itself, mossy but sturdy. On it rests a small porcelain thimble painted with a single red rose. You lift it and find another slip of parchment tucked beneath. A token small yet weighty grown, whoso bears it claims the throne. Christie smiles softly. A thimble, small but used to mend what is torn. The throne, perhaps the seat at the table? Return to the terrace, where the chairs await to mend the pieces of our tale. You retrace your steps past the birdcage clearing, the gravel path now seeming shorter beneath the lantern's steady glow. The jasmine trellis appears again, and beyond it, the terrace gate swings open at your approach, as though guided by some unseen hand. Once on the terrace, you find Christie waiting beside the wicker chairs. She gestures to the cushions. "Sit," she invites. "Mend the story." You place the porcelain thimble on the small table between you. She pours fresh tea into your cup, its warmth a gentle comfort after the maze's hush. You taste it, this time with a hint of lavender, a deliberate nod to your path, and it settles like velvet. She takes the thimble into her hand and inspects it closely. "This token signifies care and precision," she muses. "In detective work, the smallest detail can crown the greatest conclusion." Her gaze meets yours, deep and deliberate. "Tell me, what have you seen?" You describe the birdcage, the heart inscription, the rose-etched thimble, and the hush of the maze. She nods thoughtfully. All symbols of confinement and care, the heart locked and the rose protected, the thimble to stitch and heal. I think our mystery tonight pertains to something both hidden and delicate, perhaps a secret in this very house. She stands, brushing crumbs of moss from her skirt. Shall we investigate inside? You follow her across the terrace and through the drawing room, where the fire has dimmed to glowing embers. She crosses to a cabinet of curiosities, a tall glass case filled with seashells, fossils, and framed butterflies. At the bottom, behind a row of mounted dragonflies, you notice a small locked drawer. Christie produces another key, this one ornate in silver, and opens the drawer. Inside lies an ivory hairpin carved with a rosette motif that matches the thimble's red bloom. She lifts it, holding it to the lamp's light. Ah, a companion piece. She tucks the pin into her hair. The thimble mended what this might have loosened. A hidden clasp, a lost hairpiece. She steps back to the visitor's chair, motioning you to sit once more. Listen closely. She settles, voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. Years ago, my dear friend Veronica disappeared from this very drawing room. No sound, no struggle, only an empty chair and a faint perfume of rose and honey. You lean in as she continues. She wore a gown fastened by a pin just like this. Later, when the gown was found, the pin was missing. No one ever discovered why she vanished or where she went. A slow breeze drifts in, stirring the curtains. Christie's eyes glimmer. Tonight, we retrace her final evening. First, a walk along the cliff path. She mentioned a yearning to see the moon's reflection on the water. She stands, offering you her hand. Will you join me on the cliffs? You rise and follow her through the French doors onto a path that winds down to the rocky shoreline. Lanterns illuminate each step, but here, nearer the sea, their glow is soft and shifting. You watch the waves froth white against dark rock, and overhead, a sliver of moon casts silver across the water's undulations. Christie walks close to the cliff edge, lantern in hand, and pauses beneath a weathered bench carved with initials, V.M. You crouch to examine the stone and notice a faint indentation. Setting the lantern beside you, you press a finger into the hollow and the bench tilts, revealing a shallow cavity. Inside lies a folded letter, edged with salt stains. She retrieves it carefully. The letter reads, "My dearest Agatha, if you read these words, know that I sought freedom from shadows that taunted my sleep. Tonight, I trust only the sea to carry my truth. Should I fail, remember me in petals and pen." Her voice falters. Veronica wrote this under the moon's gaze, and then walked into the tide. You look out at the breakers, feeling the pull of their ebb and flow. Christie's hand closes gently around the letter. The rose, the thimble, the hairpin, they were her tokens of courage and care. But the maze, the cage, the bench, they were her choices of confinement and escape. She closes her eyes and breathes deeply. I believe she intended to vanish willingly, leaving only clues for me to follow. You help her fold the letter and tuck it into your coat. The waves crash again and the lantern's glow shivers against the rocks. She turns to you, her eyes bright. Thank you for guiding me through her story. Together we have honored her memory. She leads you back up the path to the terrace, where the house awaits, a timeless silhouette against the star-dusted sky. Inside, the drawing room glows softly, as though aglow with the warmth of shared discovery. She pours one last cup of tea, and you sit, the locket never far from your hand, knowing that in this cozy evening with Agatha Christie, every whisper of wind and rustle of leaf was part of a puzzle, and you have solved it, one gentle clue at a time. The night deepens around Greenway House, and the sky is turned a velvet shade of blue, dusted with the faint shimmer of stars. Inside, the drawing room is quiet again. The embers in the hearth glow low, casting a soft amber light across the thick carpet and the scattered remains of your evening tea. Agatha Christie sits across from you, a notebook open in her lap, its pages dense with neatly inked handwriting. She taps her pen once against the paper before looking up with a thoughtful smile. "There's one place we haven't visited," she says gently, "and I think it's time." You raise an eyebrow, waiting for her to explain. "My study," she adds, "where the true mysteries take shape." She stands, moving with quiet purpose, and you follow her through a narrow hallway whose walls are lined with portraits of long-past ancestors. Their eyes seem to follow your movements, not with judgment, but with the quiet patience of those who've seen many stories unfold. At the end of the hall, She opens a door painted soft green, and you step into the heart of her creative world. The room is warm and filled with the scent of aged paper, lavender polish, and just a trace of dried ink. A wide mahogany desk stands beneath a tall window overlooking the moonlit cove, the curtains tied back to let in the night air. Stacks of notebooks are arranged with surprising precision. Beside the desk, a bookshelf holds worn volumes of law, detective manuals, maps of old Devon, and books in foreign languages, tools of the trade. On the desk, a small brass lamp glows gently, illuminating an open journal and a curious collection of objects, a magnifying glass, a fountain pen with a cracked cap, and a faded postcard bearing a single word, "Come." Christie watches your gaze. Linger on it. "That was sent to me anonymously years ago," she says softly. No return address, no clue to its origin, but it arrived just before I began writing The Man in the Brown Suit. A challenge, perhaps, or an invitation. You lean closer. The handwriting on the postcard is delicate, almost hesitant. The ink has smudged at one corner as if someone held it a moment too long before letting it go. Christie lifts a slim box from a shelf and sets it before you. "This," she says, "is my archive of the unsolved. Inside are small items, each wrapped carefully in tissue, a cracked locket with nothing inside, a single leather glove with the initials E.T. stitched at the wrist, a train ticket to Istanbul never punched." You lift each piece slowly, reverently. None are labeled. All are mysteries that never quite found their place in her stories, or perhaps never wanted to be solved. "These things," she says, "are the breath between words, the pause between questions and answers. I often look through them when I feel a story slipping through my fingers." She crosses to the window and looks out across the moonlit cove. The reflection of the house glimmers on the water below, soft and surreal. You sense the room itself pause as if holding its breath with her. "There's something comforting about the unsolved, don't you think?" she murmurs. "We so often chase the answer, when sometimes the question is the thing that gives shape to the world." You nod, and she smiles gently. "Let's leave one mystery tonight for the night to hold." She reaches beneath the desk and draws out a leather-bound book. Its cover is unmarked. She opens it carefully, and you realize it is her personal dream journal. The handwriting here is looser, more vulnerable. She turns the pages, stopping on one in the middle. A small newspaper clipping is tucked between the sheets. You lift it. The headline reads, "Devon woman found after 11-day disappearance." There's a photograph, grainy and too dark, of Agatha herself, emerging from a hotel in Harrogate in 1926. She watches you with calm, unreadable eyes. "Even a mystery writer must sometimes vanish," she says. "That was my moment to live what I usually only write. 11 days in silence and a borrowed name, surrounded by strangers who never guessed." You return the clipping to the journal. The weight of that silence lingers in the room. "I wasn't running away," she continues. "Not entirely. I was searching for stillness, a place where the noise could not follow. You understand, don't you?" Outside, the waves roll in steady rhythm. The room grows warmer, as though the very walls embrace you. You nod, and she closes the journal. "Would you like to see the writing room?" You follow her up a narrow stair to a smaller chamber tucked beneath the eaves. It smells faintly of old pencils, lavender, and parchment. A single armchair rests beside a writing desk angled toward the window. On the sill sits a rock from the beach below, a seashell, and a pair of reading glasses with cracked lenses. A large corkboard above the desk is covered in notes pinned with colored threads, connecting timelines, clues, motives. You recognize sketches for Murder on the Orient Express, Death on the Nile, The Hollow, fragments that would become legend. But beside them are new notes, blank names, a crime scene yet to be described, a torn glove, a locket returned. She stands beside you, quiet. "I'm not finished," she says simply, and then she opens a drawer and takes out a fresh sheet of paper, dips a pen into ink, and turns to you. "Tonight," she whispers, "we write something together, something no one else will know." The pen scratches faintly on the paper, drawing the outline of a garden, a hidden bench, a secret kept in silence for years. You begin to speak and she writes. Slowly, gently the story unfolds. It's a tale of two strangers meeting under a midsummer moon. A vanished woman, a locket returned, a promise kept in twilight. And as the words fill the page, the window pane reflects the two of you. One known to the world, the other passing through for just one evening, yet part of the story all the same. When at last the clock downstairs chimes midnight, she sets down the pen and closes the notebook. "We'll finish tomorrow," she says. "Mysteries, after all, thrive in the pause." You walk back down the stairs together. In the drawing room, the fire has almost gone out, but the warmth remains, lingering in the walls, the cushions, the very air. She pours you one final glass of brandy. It glows amber in the candlelight. "Sleep now," she says, voice barely more than breath. "You've walked the maze, sat with memory, seen the secrets kept in drawers and ink." You nod, heart full. As you settle into the window seat, the velvet curtain drawn close behind you, the waves continue their soft rhythm against the cove, and the stars burn steady above Devon. And in that quiet space, half dream, half memory, you drift gently, easily into sleep. Morning has not yet arrived, but the house breathes with the hush of dreams. You stir beneath a knitted blanket, the scent of lavender still clinging faintly to the air, and the sound of gentle waves murmuring beyond the curtains. Somewhere, a wooden floor creaks, the old house shifting in its bones. For a moment, you wonder if it was all a dream. The tea, the stories, the mysteries held in objects in silence. But there on the small table beside your chair rests a folded page, your name written in Agatha's elegant hand. You unfold it. It is not a story, not quite. It's a list, a strange one. The glove left at Paddington, the postcard from Cairo, the green locket, empty. The name Emily never spoken aloud, the scent of violets near the sea, the woman in room 203, the book that was never returned, the silence at dinner, the question asked once and never again, the visitor who never left a name. You read it twice and still it makes no clear sense. But somehow you understand. She is leaving you with a question. Downstairs, the house begins to stir. The fire has been relit. Somewhere in the kitchen, a kettle hums softly. The scent of fresh bread and orange marmalade begins to thread through the air. You follow it like a path, slow-footed and still wrapped in the velvet hush of early dawn. Agatha is already there, dressed in her warm housecoat, standing by the window, holding her cup in both hands. She turns when she hears you, her expression quiet and kind. "Sleep well?" she asks. You nod, and she gestures for you to join her at the table. The breakfast is simple and comforting. Warm scones, soft butter, dark tea in delicate cups. You eat in silence, and it is a comfortable silence. The kind that doesn't ask anything of you. The kind that fills the soul without words. After breakfast, you step out into the early morning garden. The sea is calm. A single gull wheels overhead, then disappears. The flowers are still closed, dew settling on their petals like quiet promises. The sky is a pale watercolor, not quite blue, not quite gold. Agatha walks beside you, hands tucked behind her back. "This is my favorite time," she says softly, "when the world hasn't quite remembered itself yet. Anything might still be true." You walk the gravel path together, past the rose arches and the bee boxes, down to the little bench tucked beneath the yew tree. She sits and you sit beside her. She looks at the garden, but her eyes seem far away. "Do you know," she begins, "I sometimes dream that Poirot walks these paths, that I'll turn a corner and find him here, little mustache twitching, asking for tea and telling me I've gotten it all wrong." She smiles. "And then I remember, I made him. I summoned him from nothing, and still, he surprises me." You glance at her and she meets your eyes. "Characters are like memories," she says. "They visit us, stay a while, and leave us changed. We never really lose them." The moment stretches long and gentle. Finally, she stands and dusts her hands. "Come," she says. "I want to show you one last thing." You follow her back inside, through the warm corridors of the house, past the study and the drawing room, into a narrow hallway you hadn't noticed before. At the very end is a small door, painted the same color as the walls. She opens it. It leads to a room barely larger than a cupboard. Inside is a writing desk, a single lamp, and a typewriter, well-worn, ivory keys dulled with use. The walls are covered in pages pinned like constellations, a map of fragments, dialogue, clues, observations, scraps of dreams. This, she says, was my war room. During the long nights, the lonely ones, I came here to write what frightened me, what I couldn't say aloud. You step in, the room smells of ink and cedarwood. She gestures toward the typewriter. I haven't used it in years, she murmurs, but perhaps you will. You sit, there's a fresh page already in the roller. Agatha watches, not as a teacher or a legend, but simply as a companion on a quiet morning. You press a key, just one. The letter stamps itself on the page, a single mark in a sea of white, the beginning of something. She places a hand gently on your shoulder. You see, she says, it isn't about solving the mystery, it's about choosing to tell it. Outside, the morning rises, the garden waits. The waves touch the cove like they have for centuries, soft, certain, unchanging. And as Agatha Christie leaves you in that quiet room, alone but not lonely, you realize she has given you something very old and very rare. Time to wonder, time to write, time to dream, time to sleep. The train sighs like a creature breathing in the dark. Somewhere beneath you, iron wheels cradle the frozen rails as the Orient Express glides eastward, cutting a silver path through the deep snows of Eastern Europe. The hour is late. The sky has folded into velvet, and your world has shrunk to a corridor of mahogany and brass. Outside, the landscape disappears into blue-black stillness. Pine trees pass like shadows. The windows of distant villages blink and vanish behind you like forgotten thoughts. You do not know the exact country you are in, perhaps Hungary or perhaps already Romania. It doesn't matter. The train is a world unto itself, and everything beyond it is just a dream on the other side of glass. You are walking slowly toward the salon car. Your slippers make no sound on the red velvet runner. The lights overhead are dim, casting a soft golden glow against the paneling. Crystal sconces flicker gently. The scent of polished wood and bergamot lingers in the air. Somewhere ahead, a piano plays, soft, melancholic, unresolved. As you open the door to the salon, warmth greets you like an old friend. The room is hushed, almost reverent. Lamps glow amber along the edges, and the windows reflect a ghostly version of everyone inside. A steward in white gloves nods to you and guides you to a small table beside the window. A silver teapot awaits, accompanied by slices of lemon, honey in a cut glass jar, and delicate sugar cubes stacked like tiny alabaster blocks. Steam curls from the spout. You are not the only one here. At a nearby table, a woman in a fur-collared coat reads a French novel, lips moving soundlessly. A man with a thin mustache and too much cologne smokes a cigarette in a long holder, watching the pianist with tired eyes. An elderly couple sits close together, their hands always touching, and seated near the far end, facing the window, is a man in a gray suit, notebook open on the table, but his pen resting still. He stares not at the page, but at the reflection of the train moving through the night. The train shudders slightly, only slightly, and continues on. You pour your tea. It is Darjeeling, delicate and floral, with a trace of spice beneath. You sip, and with every swallow, the tension in your shoulders melts further. The clatter of the outside world is gone. Your thoughts begin to slow. The pianist plays a tune you don't recognize, something old, perhaps Russian. The notes fall like snow, soft, melancholy, and slow to settle. A lull falls over the car. The man in the gray suit turns to you. "You're not writing," he says gently, nodding at your empty notepad. His accent is British, faintly Oxfordian, softened by years abroad. There is something familiar about his face, though you cannot place it. You smile apologetically. "It's not the night for writing," you say. "No," he agrees. "It's the night for remembering." His voice is not intrusive. It's the kind of voice that feels like a coat draped over your shoulders, warm, respectful, dryly amused. "I used to travel this route often," he says, sipping from his own teacup. "Years ago, Paris to Istanbul, each trip a little different, each one with its secrets." He glances toward the pianist. "There was a time when every passenger had a title," he murmurs. "A countess, a baron, a chess champion, a ballerina running from scandal. Even a murderer, once. You raise an eyebrow. He smiles, but I won't say which. The man returns to his notebook, but the air around you has shifted. The tea seems warmer now, the room more mysterious. You glance out the window, but there's only blackness and your own face looking back. Time becomes fluid. Another steward appears, this one carrying a silver tray with tiny cakes arranged like gems, almond, rose, pistachio, and dark chocolate with candied orange. He offers one to you with a quiet bow. You select a rosewater sponge, light as air, perfumed with something like memory. As you eat, a story begins to form. You can feel it unfurling, slowly, like a silk scarf drawn from a pocket. Not a story you've read, but one you've lived, or will live soon. You close your eyes. And suddenly the train is different. Gone is the soft modern hum. Now the air is thicker, spiced with smoke and something metallic. The salon has grown quieter. You look up, and no one is where they were before. The woman with the novel is gone. The couple has vanished. The man in the gray suit is still there, but he is now wearing gloves and reading from a telegram, his brow furrowed. A conductor enters, not with cakes, but with a file folder pressed tight to his chest. The piano has stopped. "Excuse me," the conductor says to the man. "We've received a message from Belgrade. There's a delay." The man frowns. "What sort of delay?" The conductor hesitates. "A body, monsieur, on the line." There's a silence. Then the man sighs and folds the telegram into his breast pocket. "Of course," he says. "There always is." The salon tilts again. You blink, and it is gone. The pianist is playing once more. The cakes are sweet. The tea is untouched. The elderly couple laughs quietly. The train continues on. You glance down at your notepad, and there, on a page you hadn't touched, is a single line in unfamiliar handwriting. "Look for the woman in the emerald dress." You do not remember writing it. You do not remember seeing anyone in emerald. And yet, the train passes through a tunnel. For a few seconds, all is black. The windows show only candlelight and reflection, your own face, the silver teapot, the empty plate. Then, when you emerge, she is there, a new passenger, sitting alone at the far end, half shadowed by the window's frame. A woman in an emerald velvet gown, her gloved fingers cradling a cup of tea, her hair swept up in old-fashioned curls. She looks like she stepped out of 1923, or perhaps 1890, or a dream. She does not notice you. She stares at the pianist, or past him. The man in the gray suit is watching her too. "Ignore her," he says softly. "Why?" you ask. "Because the more you notice her," he replies, "the more real she becomes." You glance again. She raises her head and meets your gaze. Her eyes are not unkind, but they are deep, ancient. They are not eyes you would forget. She smiles and lifts her teacup in a silent toast. You look down quickly. The page of your notebook has changed. Now it reads, "Ask her what she left in Vienna." You raise your head, but she is gone. The chair is empty. The piano stops. And outside, the train whistles, long and low as it begins to slow. A station approaches, quiet and snow-covered, its signs written in Cyrillic. A man in a thick wool coat waits on the platform, his hat pulled low. He carries a leather suitcase scuffed with age. The train breathes again, and the night stretches ahead, quiet and full of stories yet to be told. The morning breaks gently, as if not to disturb the world Greenway House has created in its own time. Mist rises from the river Dart in silent columns, winding among the trees like forgotten tales. The sunlight is golden and cool, filtering through gauzy curtains into the guest bedroom, where you wake slowly, wrapped in warm linen sheets in the soft hush of countryside silence. The guest room is filled with the subtle personality of a house that has seen many visitors. A dressing mirror tilted just so, a small vase with dried lavender on the mantel, books on the nightstand that span centuries, Austen, Wilkie Collins, and even an early copy of The Mysterious Affair at Styles with a note in Agatha's own hand. First sparks. Downstairs, the smell of toast and tea welcomes you. The kitchen is alive with morning sounds, clinking china, a kettle on the boil, and the faint laughter of Miss Holland humming something cheerful as she slices fresh bread. Agatha is already in the sunroom. She sits by a window overlooking the river. a breakfast tray beside her, and a letter in her hand. Her dressing gown is of deep blue wool, soft and elegant, and her hair is loosely pulled back in the fashion of someone at peace with herself and the world she's built around her. She sees you and waves you in. "Sleep well?" You nod, and she smiles. "There's something about the Devon air, isn't there?" She muses, sipping her tea. "I sometimes think I solve more mysteries here than I ever did in London or Cairo." A robin perches on the windowsill there, chirping once before flitting off toward the orchard. She watches it go, her gaze thoughtful. "I wrote 5 Little Pigs just over there," she says, pointing to a worn oak bench beneath the apple trees. "It was the first time I felt truly haunted by my own characters." She pauses. "Did you know," she says, "that when I first created Poirot, I never meant for him to be so enduring? He was a solution to a story, a plot device, but the little man had other plans." She gestures for you to follow her into the drawing room. There, on the table, is a stack of handwritten pages, unpublished, private. "I still write longhand," she confides. "There's something sacred in it. My thoughts move at the pace of ink." You watch her lift one page and read it aloud. It's a quiet passage, something unfinished, a scene between an inspector and a grieving widow. Her voice is soft but weighted with purpose. "I'm not sure where this one goes," she says, setting the page down. "But that's the joy, isn't it? Not knowing." Outside, the bell from the village chapel rings out across the fields. She pours another cup of tea and asks, "Would you like to see the boathouse?" The path leads through the orchard and down a slope of mossy earth. Trees hang low overhead, filtering the sunlight into delicate patches on the path. The river runs quietly beside you, smooth and glassy. The boathouse stands in the shadow of a cypress tree, weathered and quiet. Inside, there are dusty oars, an old canoe, and a desk tucked into the corner. A single chair sits beside it, facing the water. "This is where I came to disappear," she says. "During the war. During the years I wanted no one to find me." She does not elaborate. She doesn't need to. Instead, she sits on the bench and closes her eyes, letting the breeze lift strands of hair from her face. "Do you know," she says quietly, "I believe stories save us? When the world feels too heavy, we disappear into fiction, not to forget, but to remember that we are not alone." You sit beside her, and for a time, neither of you speaks. Only the wind, the water, and the faint sound of bird songs surround you. "I never meant to become the queen of crime," she says at last. "I only ever wanted to understand people, what frightens them, what comforts them, what they hide." Back at the house, lunch is laid in the garden. A simple spread of sandwiches, lemonade, and fresh strawberries. The cat weaves between the chairs. Agatha smiles, brushing crumbs from her lap. "I wonder," she says, "what my own mystery would look like. One day, someone will try to write The Mystery of Agatha Christie. They'll get it all wrong, of course." You laugh. "And what would the truth be?" She winks. "Now that, my dear, would be telling." The afternoon stretches long and golden, the air sweet with honeysuckle and memory. And still, the story continues. The corridors of the Orient Express curved like memory, familiar and elusive at once. You walk them slowly now, as if each step were leading you not forward, but deeper inward, into a place where time blurred and stories waited in the folds. Outside, dawn was threatening the horizon. The snow had stopped, and the night was turning from velvet to slate. But inside the train, the hour remained suspended. You wandered back toward your compartment, past rows of sleeping guests and gently rocking doors. The woman in green no longer frightened you. She intrigued you, called you. Her presence was like the whisper of perfume on silk, vanishing and unforgettable. When you reached your compartment, something had changed. The door was ajar. Inside, everything looked the same, except for one small thing on the pillow. The photograph, the same one from the trunk, the woman in green, the man in the uniform, Vienna, 1913. But now there was writing on the back, in pencil, faint and slanted. "Find the brooch. Return it to her. Only then will she sleep." You held the photo longer this time, studied it. Her eyes were the same as last night, alive, searching, grieving. And the man, he wore medals from a forgotten empire. Austria-Hungary, the world that ended when the guns of Sarajevo fired. You slipped the photo into your pocket and sat down. The train shuddered again, like it had inhaled sharply. The lights dimmed. You knew what you had to do. You needed to find the brooch. But where would something like that be hidden? You went to the dining car, now quiet in the morning lull. The white cloths had been stripped, the silverware cleared. The pianist was gone. Only the scent of dark coffee and pastries lingered, ghosts of breakfast yet to come. You asked the steward if anyone had lost a brooch. He raised an eyebrow. A brooch, monsieur. We find many lost things, gloves, books, scarves, but not jewelry, not for many years. You asked again, described it. Green? He asked. Emeralds? You nodded. He leaned closer. I've heard the story. All of us who work the train have. The emerald brooch of Vienna. A gift from an officer to a woman he never saw again. Why? He shrugged. Because he died on the front, and she never got off the train. Your chest tightened. Some say she still looks, the steward whispered. Still searches. We try not to disturb her. Where would the brooch be? He considered. Some say the baggage car. Others say the piano. She liked music, but I would look in the chapel car. The what? He smiled faintly. Car 9, only used for special services, weddings, funerals, memorials. You thanked him and stood. Be careful, he said. There are stories older than tracks on this train. You walked the corridor again, but this time your steps were more sure. Car 9. You passed the sleeping car, the salon, the observation lounge, and then you found it. The door was closed, unmarked, brass hinges, polished wood, but it felt different, older than the others, as if it belonged to another train entirely. You pushed it open. Inside, it was silent. The chapel was small, just 6 pews, a narrow aisle, a stained glass window at the far end, its design blurred by frost and time. Candles sat in brass holders along the walls, unlit. A faint scent of wax and lavender lingered in the stillness. You moved slowly, your footsteps muffled by a thick blue rug. At the front there was a pedestal, and on it, a glass box. Inside the box, resting on velvet, was the brooch. Emerald, gold, and silver, shaped like a lily, pale and perfect. You stared. This was it. The gift never given, the promise never kept, the reason she wandered. You reached out, hands trembling slightly, but before you could lift the box, someone cleared their throat. You turned. A man stood at the chapel door, tall, sharp cheekbones, dressed in a black coat with polished boots. His eyes were blue, cold as steel. That does not belong to you, he said. You explained. The woman, the photo, the message. He nodded slowly. You saw her. Yes. And she spoke? You nodded again. Then it is time, he said. Take it, return it to her, but not here. She waits in the place where it began. Vienna? No. He pointed downward. The service tunnel. You frowned. There is a maintenance passage below the train, built for engineers during the early years. She walks it now, searching. You must find her. Why me? He shrugged. Because she showed herself to you. That is reason enough. You lifted the glass, took the brooch. It was warm, as if it had remembered touch. The man stepped aside, revealing a hatch in the floor you hadn't noticed. He opened it. Below, a narrow staircase descended into shadow. Pipes, cables, the thrum of the engine somewhere distant. He handed you a lantern. She is waiting, he said. You nodded and descended. The stairs creaked. The air was cold, smelled of metal and smoke. The tunnel stretched beneath the length of the train, a corridor of steel and brass. You walked slowly, lantern raised, footsteps echoing like drops in a well. There were markings on the walls, dates, names, etchings scratched by engineers long dead. And then far ahead, a green light, not from your lantern, from her. She stood in the center of the passage, her back to you, still, waiting. You approached slowly. She turned. Her face was calmer now, not smiling, not sad, just ready. You held out the brooch. She took it gently, held it to her chest, and for a moment, You saw something in her eyes. Peace. The lantern dimmed. She stepped backward and vanished. No sound, no scream, only the cold and the faint scent of roses. You climbed back up into the chapel car. The man in the black coat was gone. The glass box was empty, but a new item sat on the velvet, a white lily, fresh, alive. You left the chapel car with a silence inside you, not empty, but full. The kind of silence that follows the last page of a story you've lived rather than read. The train continued to hum beneath your feet, now easing its way into morning. Light began to break beyond the curtains, but it felt like the train itself still traveled through something softer than dawn. A liminal space, a thread between worlds. You returned to your compartment, unsure what you expected. The brooch was gone. The photograph remained on the table, but the pencil writing had faded into blankness. Only the image endured. Her, forever reaching through time. You sat by the window and poured the last of the lukewarm tea into a porcelain cup. Outside, the landscape blurred. Frosted fields, distant hills, the occasional village with smoking chimneys and early lights. You almost didn't notice when someone knocked on your door. Softly. Twice. You opened it. The woman from earlier, the librarian, stood there. Her cardigan now dusted with biscuit crumbs, a notebook in her hands. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" She hesitated. "For not being afraid." You raised an eyebrow. "She comes to those who are open," the woman said, "but not all of them choose to listen. You did." You stepped aside, letting her in. She sat across from you and opened her notebook. It was filled with train sketches, dates, and pressed flowers. "I've chased her story for years," she continued, "but I was never chosen. I think she was waiting for someone who would return it." You looked out the window. "She loved him," the librarian said softly. "That officer, he died in the Tyrolean Alps. Never made it back. She wore the brooch until the last moment." "She died on the train?" The woman nodded. "Heart failure, in her sleep, between Salzburg and Vienna. She had no family, no papers, only the brooch and the photograph. They buried her in Vienna, but something remained. You thought of the tunnel, the lily, the look in her eyes. She waited for him," the woman whispered, "and when she couldn't find him, she waited for someone else." The train began to slow. "We're arriving?" you asked. "Yes," she said. "Budapest." The name sat on your tongue like a dream. She stood, smoothed her skirt, smiled. "Next time," she said, "ask the steward for the violet room. It has a hidden drawer." And then she was gone. You watched her step into the corridor, her figure reflected in the brass lining of the wall, fading as she moved. The train groaned gently and exhaled steam as it pulled into the station. Golden light spilled through the windows now. The snowy rooftops of Budapest welcomed the dawn. Life stirred beyond the tracks. Vendors opening carts, men sweeping stairs, the faint melody of a violin somewhere out of sight. You stepped onto the platform. Passengers bustled around you, but none felt real. The air was sharp and alive. You turned to look back at the Orient Express. Its windows glowed softly. Curtains fluttered. A faint figure moved in the chapel car, a silhouette with her head tilted slightly, as if listening to a faraway melody. She was gone in a blink, but you knew. She had found peace. The train's whistle sounded once. You adjusted your coat and turned toward the city, and as you walked, you noticed something in your pocket. You reached in and pulled it out, a new photograph, you, standing beside her. No smile, no fear, just a shared understanding. No words on the back this time, just a pressed lily, white and perfect. The snow began to fall again, quietly, delicately, as if it too were remembering, and the train, behind you, slowly vanished into the mist. The rain had begun early that afternoon, first as a soft mist clinging to the windows of Downton Abbey, and then by tea time it had become a steady, patient drumbeat on the glass. Not the kind of rain that brought thunder or wind. No, this was the kind of rain that knew how to stay. It blanketed the grounds in gray, turned the gravel paths into rivers of reflection, and softened the outlines of the world outside the manor until it all looked like a watercolor left to bleed. Inside, The house held its breath in a kind of quiet only old estates can conjure. Not silence, but the hush of carpets absorbing footsteps, of grandfather clocks ticking somewhere in the distance, of fires humming gently in their hearths, and of servants moving like whispers through the halls. The hour was just past 5, and the drawing room glowed with the golden dimness of late afternoon. Lamps had been lit. The curtains were only half drawn, as if the room hadn't quite decided whether to let the outside in or keep it at bay. Lady Mary sat near the fire, a book open in her lap but unread. Her gaze wandered instead to the flames, her fingers idle against the linen page. She wasn't brooding, not exactly. More waiting. For what, she couldn't have said. The rain had drawn something out of her, a restlessness, a longing, an ache that had no name and asked only to be felt quietly, like the hum of a cello. In the corner, Anna, the lady's maid, adjusted a cushion and then stood with folded hands, her eyes discreetly on the window. It was rare for the house to be this still. The men were away on business in York. The younger children were with their tutors. Even the dowager countess had not appeared since luncheon, having claimed the weather aggravated her nerves. Somewhere downstairs, Mrs. Patmore was preparing a warm pear tart, and the scent of cinnamon and baked butter wafted faintly up through the floorboards. Carson had just finished polishing the silver in the dining room, and now sat at the back hallway table, reading the newspaper slowly with his glasses on the tip of his nose. In the library, Lord Grantham's desk stood vacant, his fountain pen still uncapped, a telegram half-written beside it. The fire there had burned low, casting long orange shadows across the leather chairs and the old oak shelves where first editions sat like ancient secrets. And in the servants' quarters, a game of whist had begun under low light. Quiet laughter drifted through the stone corridors, like the memory of summer. Upstairs, Lady Edith stood by her window, her chin resting lightly on her palm, watching the rain trace paths across the pane. Her room was warm, blanketed in amber light from a nearby lamp, and filled with the faint ticking of her little carriage clock. She wasn't sad, not exactly. She had received a letter earlier that day. The handwriting had been familiar, the address unfamiliar. She hadn't opened it, not yet. Instead, it lay beside the lamp, its presence tugging at her like a loose thread in the corner of her mind. Below her, in the great hall, the rain tapped gently at the high windows, and the shadows of the staircase stretched like long fingers across the marble floor. Thomas Barrow, the under-butler, moved through the main corridor with practiced ease. He carried a tray with 3 cups of tea, one for Lady Cora, who was upstairs with a faint headache, and 2 others for visitors who had arrived just before the rain turned heavy. The guests were distant cousins, if not by blood, then by marriage, sent to Downton for a night or 2, while repairs were made to their estate on the coast. Thomas, as always, wore civility like armor, but his eyes were watchful. Every guest was a story waiting to be read. In the music room, a piano lid stood half open, and one note hummed faintly beneath the rain. Someone had struck a key and left it vibrating, a single G note clinging to life in the quiet air. Lady Sybil's absence still lived in every hallway, even after all these months. Some days her memory was soft, a pleasant warmth. Other days, like this one, it lingered in the rooms like a breeze from an open window, unexpected, melancholy, and tender. Down in the old wine cellar, Bates checked the inventory without much urgency. The stone walls were cool, and the flickering lantern made the bottles glow like amber. He ran a finger down a dusty label and smiled faintly. 1869. A good year. He remembered serving it once, years ago, at a harvest dinner, when the house had been full and music had flowed through its bones. That memory clung to the cellar like the scent of aged oak. Upstairs again, Lady Mary rose at last. Her tea had gone cold. She walked to the window and pressed her fingertips to the glass. Rain kissed her skin through the chill. Beyond the gardens, the fountain blurred, its edges dissolved in mist. Somewhere down the corridor, a floorboard creaked. Familiar. Possibly Anna, or someone else. Lady Mary didn't turn around. She liked the feeling of the house behind her, the weight of its stories pressing gently against her back. Downton was many things, a monument, a home, a burden, a memory in motion, but on rainy days it became something else entirely. It became a heartbeat. Lady Cora emerged from her room with a soft rustle of fabric. She carried a small basket of mending, something she rarely did but found soothing on quiet evenings. She descended to the drawing room, her footsteps barely a whisper on the stairs. When she entered, Mary offered her a slight smile. "Shall I pour you a fresh cup?" Mary asked. "Only if you join me," Cora replied, and so they sat, not speaking much. The fire did most of the talking, crackling gently. Outside, the rain kept falling. In the distance, a clock chimed 6. Anna appeared quietly with a knitted shawl, draping it over the Countess's shoulders with practiced grace. In that moment, the Abbey held something rare, equilibrium, no great drama, no telegrams from war fronts or proposals at the dinner table, just the soft rhythm of living, the sound of slippers on Persian rugs, the ticking of clocks, the scent of damp earth from the gardens, the rustle of the ivy against the west-facing wall. It was a rainy evening at Downton Abbey, and nothing in the world needed fixing. Down in the kitchens, the warmth was different. The hearth blazed with orange light, throwing flickering shadows across the tiled floor. Copper pots gleamed above Mrs. Patmore's head as she stirred a thick carrot soup that filled the room with a savory perfume. She muttered to herself, as always, half to Daisy, half to the recipe that only truly existed in her memory. Daisy moved quickly between the workstations, folding napkins, arranging tea cakes on polished silver trays, her mind half on the task, half on something else. She liked the rain. It made the world seem more like a lullaby, slower, softer. She often imagined it washed the air clean of old memories. "Don't forget the Madeira cake," Mrs. Patmore called, not looking up. "And don't slice it until the Major arrives." "Which Major?" Daisy asked. "Whichever one's still alive," Mrs. Patmore said dryly, turning her attention to a tray of roasted chestnuts. "You know how the army is. Can't keep them out of our drawing rooms." In the scullery, a window was cracked open slightly. Rain dripped steadily off the sill. The sound was rhythmic, calming, like the ticking of the great hall clock, but wetter, gentler. Upstairs, the house had taken on a golden hush. Candles were lit in the side hallways where the electric bulbs had gone out, casting wavery glows along the old portraits that lined the corridor. Lady Cora and Mary still sat near the fireplace, now joined by Lady Edith, who finally opened her letter and read it in silence. There was nothing dramatic in the contents, no grand declarations, just a few lines about the weather in Paris and a mention of a new gallery opening on the left bank. But the handwriting was unmistakable, the sort that curled slightly upward on the L's. Her breath caught, but she folded the paper carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. She said nothing to the others. Carson entered with quiet authority, announcing that dinner would be delayed half an hour, due to the weather and a small carriage mishap at the gate. No injuries, just a wheel stuck in the softened earth. The Dowager Countess was being brought inside by foot, under 2 umbrellas, by a thoroughly drenched Molesley. Mary glanced at Edith and allowed a small smirk. "I imagine she'll be in a terrible mood." "She always is when her shoes get wet," Edith said without looking up. And sure enough, not 10 minutes later, the front door opened with a gust of wet air and the unmistakable voice of Violet Crawley, loud enough to fill the lower halls. "I told you to avoid puddles, not dance through them. Molesley, for heaven's sake, this is an umbrella, not a cathedral roof." She arrived in the drawing room shortly after, her hat askew, her gloves damp, and her disdain fully intact. But when offered a brandy by Carson and a blanket by Cora, she settled with remarkable grace into her favorite chair and muttered, "I suppose even the English must bow to the weather eventually." The family gathered slowly, pulled in by the warmth, and the rain and the lure of a shared evening without expectations. Robert, Lord Grantham, returned from the library, his telegram finally sent, his expression unreadable. He greeted his mother, kissed his daughters on the cheek, and poured himself a scotch without saying much. The hearth blazed a little higher. The wind rose outside. The Abbey exhaled. In the servants' hall, the talk turned to ghost stories, something the younger footmen always brought up on rainy nights. They whispered about old legends, of a woman in white said to walk the west corridor, of flickering lights in the bellboard late at night when no one was ringing. Even Mrs. Hughes, never one for nonsense, admitted that the Abbey had its creaks and shadows. Thomas Barrow listened without joining in. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a faint smirk on his lips. Not mocking, just removed. He was always a little apart from the others, even when the rain softened the walls between them. Bates, meanwhile, helped Anna upstairs with the linens, both of them grateful for the silence. In their shared glance was the comfort of knowing the rhythm of the house, the patterns of light and dark, noise and quiet. They moved like the rain did, gently, deliberately. Back in the drawing room, Sybil's absence still hovered, as it always did in moments like these, when laughter broke through and then fell quiet too quickly. Robert glanced at the piano, once her domain. Cora followed his gaze. They said nothing. The clock struck 7. Dinner was being laid in the dining room, with polished formality. Polished silver, starched linen, flickering candles. The family rose slowly, as if not entirely ready to leave the comfort of the firelight behind. The rain hadn't stopped. It hadn't even lightened. It simply kept on falling, wrapping the Abbey in its quiet grip. At dinner, the conversation was gentle, polite. Violet complained about the state of the roads. Mary and Edith discussed a recent article in the Times. Robert offered a quiet toast to the perseverance of the English countryside, which earned a smile from Carson. No one mentioned politics, or death, or war. That was the unspoken agreement of rainy evenings like this. Real life could wait, just for now. As the meal ended and the plates were cleared, the family returned once more to the drawing room. A fire had been relit. Someone had turned on the gramophone. The music was soft, old, something from another time, with violins that sighed rather than sang. Lady Cora picked up her mending again. Violet dozed, chin dipped, the blanket tucked firmly around her shoulders. Edith returned to the window. Mary sipped tea, now fresh and hot. And beyond the Abbey walls, the rain continued, gentle and unyielding. It fell on all the hedgerows, on the gravestones in the village churchyard, on the fields that stretched endlessly into the dusk. It fell on memories, both buried and still living. Downton didn't speak. It didn't need to. It remembered. The hour drifted gently toward 9. Outside, the gardens were drowned in nightfall and drizzle, the hedges now little more than dark silhouettes, softened by mist. Inside the Abbey, everything slowed. Footsteps quieted. Voices dropped into whispers. Candles flickered as if responding to the storm's steady breath against the stone. In the drawing room, Lady Mary had finally picked up a book, a slim volume of poetry by Christina Rossetti. Her fingers traced the edges of the page rather than reading it. Nearby, Edith had set down her embroidery. Her eyes weren't on the stitches anymore, but somewhere far off, lost in the same memories that always crept in when the world grew this quiet. Lord Grantham remained by the fire, his second scotch untouched, staring into the flames as if searching for the shape of a memory there. Something he hadn't yet said, something that had perhaps passed between the telegrams and the silence of the library. But now wasn't the time. Not yet. Upstairs in the nursery, the faint murmur of children could be heard behind the door. Nanny West had tucked them in early. The rain always lulled them to sleep faster, and was now quietly knitting in a rocking chair near the window. The storm, distant as it was, reminded her of her own childhood in the north, where thunder was a thing of routine and roofs leaked just enough to place pots beneath. The Abbey always seemed to breathe differently when the children slept, as though it became older again, like its heartbeat slowed to match the tempo of the rain. Downstairs, Carson stood in his pantry reviewing the wine ledger. Even now, with no guests to impress and no major event to plan, the ritual mattered. Routine anchored the household, rain or not, and the steady tick of the long case clock in the hallway assured him that all was right, or at least orderly. Mrs. Hughes entered with a folded towel and a plate of shortbread. "I thought you'd forgotten supper," Carson said, though the faint lift in his voice made it more of a thanks than a complaint. "Mrs. Patmore insisted you be fed," Mrs. Hughes replied. "Said even the king's butler doesn't run on dust." Carson accepted the plate and set the towel aside. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the storm whispering faintly through the small window panes. Rain like this, Carson said finally, always reminds me of the old days, before electricity, when we carried candles from room to room and prayed the wind wouldn't blow one out. Mrs. Hughes nodded, smiling gently. Back then, even the rain had to be managed. And for a moment, they both sat there, two old pillars of the household, listening to the rain and letting time roll over them like mist. In the servants' hall, Daisy had finished her work and was now perched at the table, peeling an apple slowly, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. Ivy leaned on her elbows, eyes half closed. Alfred was reading something, probably a thriller he'd borrowed from Lord Grantham's library, dog-eared and water-stained. He turned the pages slowly, savoring every line. Jimmy was asleep in the corner, chin tucked into his coat collar, the soft snore barely louder than the rain. Only Thomas Barrow remained restless. He paced slowly past the doors, past the windows, eyes catching on things no one else noticed. A crack in the stone, a strange reflection in the mirror. He didn't trust quiet, never had. He liked control, not calm. He paused at the foot of the stairs, listening to the distant notes of music drifting down from above. Not the gramophone now. Someone had begun to play the piano. It was Edith. She hadn't played in months. But tonight, with the Dowager Countess asleep and Mary distracted and the storm draping the house in velvet silence, her fingers had found their way to the keys again. The music was simple, a lullaby, something sweet and faintly sad. Cora sat nearby, sewing forgotten in her lap, just watching her daughter play. Occasionally, she looked toward Robert, who had closed his eyes without quite sleeping. "Play that again," Cora said softly when the melody ended, and Edith did. In the hallway outside, Anna Bates paused on her way to the linen cupboard, listening. The music reminded her of something long ago in London, when she had dreamed of music halls and costumes and stage lights. Before Downton, before heartbreaks and long recoveries, before the ache in her heart had learned how to sit still. She closed her eyes and let the music fill her for a few seconds before continuing down the corridor, candlelight catching her silhouette as she walked. In the drawing room, the fire had burned low. Violet stirred slightly, one eye open just long enough to mutter, "Too much sentiment will drown a household faster than rain," before drifting back into sleep. Mary said nothing, but she reached forward and poured her grandmother another cup of tea, just in case she woke again. The house was now more memory than place. It moved like a dream, room to room, breath to breath. The walls felt thinner, the years closer, even the great upstairs hallway, usually full of brisk footsteps and rushing maids, had gone still. A place of echoes and old voices now. Rain continued to fall beyond the leaded windows. The gravel paths were puddled and glistening. The rose garden, abandoned in the twilight, sagged slightly under the weight of water. The old swing near the oak tree creaked in the wind, though no one had touched it in months. Time passed in slow spirals. Mrs. Patmore, now back in her own little kitchen corner, had wrapped a scarf around her shoulders and was sipping a cup of warm cider. She had cleaned everything already. There was no reason to be there. But still, she sat. "It's the kind of night," she whispered to herself, "where ghosts don't rattle chains. They just sit quietly with you and keep you company." The hour approached midnight. By now, the house had grown quieter than the rain. Even the storm, once determined and whispering, had softened into a gentle hush. Only the softest sighs of wind now swept across the windows, barely lifting the velvet curtains, like a hand brushing past in sleep. Upstairs, most lights were dimmed. Mary had retired without a word, her room still faintly perfumed with the scent of lavender oil. She hadn't spoken much after the fire died. She never did when the storm outside echoed the one inside. In her room, she had opened her writing desk, taken out a letter that had long gone unanswered, and held it without reading. After a moment, she placed it back inside, unopened, and quietly closed the drawer. Down the hall, Edith had left the piano an hour earlier. She now stood at her window, looking out toward the orchard. The trees swayed gently, each branch draped in shadow and glistening drops. Her breath left a faint fog on the glass as she pressed her fingers to the window pane. Somewhere beneath the surface of the silence was something she missed, something she had never quite named. Lady Cora, half asleep in bed, stirred as Robert entered the room. He crossed the carpet softly and sat beside her without speaking. The candle between them burned low. "I wonder," he said finally, "how many nights like this will have left?" She looked at him, not startled, not sad, just still. "There are always fewer than we think," she replied, her hand reaching for his. "But tonight, we have one." They remained that way, just two hands, fingers laced together like stitches in time, holding each other in the quiet. Downstairs, the servants' quarters had settled into a kind of shared sleep. Ivy was tucked beneath a woolen blanket, still in her dress, one hand curled near her cheek. Jimmy and Alfred had traded their usual teasing for silence, exhausted by the calm more than by the work. Only Daisy remained awake. She had returned to the scullery after everyone else, taking a final moment to tidy the counters, wipe the sink, and breathe the silence in. She liked this hour, when even the Abbey's ghosts seemed to rest. From the corridor, she heard a voice, soft, distant. It was Thomas talking low to himself in the hallway mirror, a habit he thought no one knew. He stood there in his shirt sleeves, hair slightly damp from rain, and whispered something too low to hear. Then, he straightened his jacket and walked away, as if the mirror had answered. In the library, Mr. Carson had returned to his armchair. Though he never slept on duty, his eyes had drifted closed. The book on his lap, an old volume of English etiquette, remained untouched. Mrs. Hughes found him that way and didn't wake him. Instead, she placed a folded blanket over his shoulders and dimmed the lamp. "It's the quiet nights that carry the most weight," she murmured to herself, "because they ask you to feel." In the kitchen, Mrs. Patmore was already dreaming. A slow, cozy dream about a younger version of herself in an apron too big, hands flour-dusted, listening to her mother sing in a Lancashire kitchen. The dreams she didn't talk about, the ones that left her smiling in her sleep. Upstairs, in a guest bedroom long unused, the Dowager Countess lay beneath a pale coverlet. Her silver hair brushed the lace pillow as the candle burned low. Her dreams were half memory, half invention, a dance in Vienna, a lost love in Venice, the time she threw her shoe at a Russian count. Outside the Abbey, the trees rustled gently. A fox moved through the rose garden. The fountain in the courtyard, though dormant for the season, collected rain in its marble basin, drop by silver drop. Inside, in a hallway dark with shadow, Anna Bates crept quietly from the nursery with a blanket in her arms. She paused at the stairwell to listen. The Abbey made sounds of its own at night. Timber sighs, wind slipping through the east corridors, the creak of old joints remembering younger years. But none of them were frightening. Not tonight. She passed a window and stopped again. Outside, beyond the chapel, the rain was lifting. The clouds had thinned, and in the dark velvet sky stars were beginning to appear. Slowly, quietly, as if unsure they were welcome. She smiled and continued down the hall, her slippers silent on the rug. Later that night, in the stillest hour, a carriage arrived at the Abbey gates. Its wheels crunched softly over wet gravel. No one expected it. No announcement had come. The coachman stepped down and opened the door. From within stepped a young woman in a navy coat, soaked at the hem. She carried a single case and a folded umbrella. Her hat was pinned neatly to one side. Her face was unfamiliar, but something in the way she looked up at the Abbey, long, quiet, as though seeing something not quite of this world, spoke of stories. She approached the front door, knocked once. Inside, the sound echoed like a stone in water. Carson, now awake again, rose slowly, straightened his jacket and opened the door. The woman curtsied faintly. "I believe," she said softly, "my grandmother once danced in your ballroom." He said nothing, but after a moment he stepped aside. "Then you'll know the way." And with that, the stranger entered Downton Abbey as the rain ended and the stars fully emerged. In every room the silence deepened, not as absence, but as presence, as though the house itself had paused to listen. And outside, beneath the last dripping leaves of the trees, the dawn began to bloom.